Well, Chag Sameach, everybody. Who knew that we would be back together here in our virtual Seder? Well, I think Dr. Fauci did actually, don't you think? Yeah, he kind of said it. He said it would take. He said it would take longer than we were all thinking last year. But I know that the Italian fellow may not be interested as much in our quest for freedom at this time of year. But we're getting close, and I know that many of you have been able to spend some of this holiday together, and we will be definitely next year. Clearly back together as a community. But for those of us who can't be this year, who are not fully vaccinated or not able to gather with family and friends, here we are tonight, unable to gather at the congregation at the temple building, but together nevertheless, as we have been for over a year. We're using our Haggadah, and I want to show you the cover of it. It is called A Humanistic Seder. And yes, I did write it, but really, its beauty was provided by my friend Sarah Dore Brooks, a member of our congregation. She teaches in our Spinoza program, and she did a beautiful job with the artwork, and I want to acknowledge that. So let's get started. Arthur will be turning the virtual pages on our YouTube screen, and my cats are over there in the corner fighting. In case you hear that, but you know it's live TV. What are you going to do? So that's how you do a Seder. So we're going to begin. Tonight we have come together to celebrate what is the most popular holiday of the Jewish year. Whether in the home or in a community gathering, the compelling themes and rituals of Passover draw us to it year after year. Perhaps it is the food. The edible symbols of the holiday evoke deep associations and warm memories. Perhaps the answer lies in the ingenious construction of the service. Seder means order. Its creators fashioned an experience in which the order of presentation enriches the retelling of the Passover story. Though our humanistic Seder differs from theirs in content and emphasis, we honor the spirit of their creativity by retaining its ancient foundations. Perhaps it is the insistent message of freedom, the birthright of every human being. In a world where millions are subjected to daily violations of their most basic human rights, Passover urges us to make freedom a reality for all people everywhere. And now I'm going to invite Arthur as we begin by bringing light into our hearts and our lives with the blessing over our candles. Baruch haor ba'olam. Baruch haor ba'adam. Baruch haor b'shalom. B'shalom. Baruch haor. Baruch haor. Bayom tov. We turn to page 2. In Jewish culture, wine symbolizes great joy. On Passover, we maximize our good spirits by imbibing in not 1 but 4 cups of wine. The creators and subsequent interpreters of the Seder offered a variety of explanations for why on Passover we quadruple our consumption of wine. The traditional reason derives from a close reading of the Torah's tale of the Exodus from Egypt. There, we find 4 different expressions used to describe the redemption of the Jews. The number 4 appears frequently in our Seder and in other Jewish literature. Shortly, we will ask 4 questions and hear about 4 children. And another use of this number is found in ancient rabbinic writings about the 4 corners of the earth. Tonight, we consider the urgency of bringing our holiday's message of freedom to everyone in every corner of the earth that they call home. So in acknowledgement of the sweetness of freedom, let's raise our first cup of wine and say the blessing, Brucha simcha ba'olam, misumenet befri agafen. L'chaim? L'chaim. Uh-huh. Oh, that is very sweet. Yes. Yeah. Kumilach. 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 rayati, yafati kumilach. Ki hine astav, avar, hageshem chalaf halach lo. Kumilach, kumilach, rayati, yafati, kumilach. That, of course, is from the Song of Songs, a book of the Tanakh, the Jewish Bible, that is associated with this time of year. We'll continue, though, at the bottom as we take a green vegetable, in our case, some very leafy, this is very leafy parsley. This was our ancient rabbi's idea of a great appetizer. Passover heralds the arrival of spring, as we just heard with the words from Song of Songs. Ancient Israelites perceived a natural connection between the rebirth of the land and the rebirth of their people. Our Seder acknowledges the link with the karpas, a green vegetable. So that's why it's the first symbolic food that we eat at our Seder. So now we dip our karpas in salt water. And these, of course, represent the tears that the Israelites were said to have shed when they were enslaved in Egypt. In this way, we combine a token of spring with the story of the Exodus. This is a beautiful little blessing written by Rabbi Wein. Brucha Adama befir yav tuva, Brucha Adonai bechol otifarta. The earth is blessed in its fruitfulness and goodness. The earth is blessed in all its glory. And bon appetit. All right. Parsley is never tasty. Oh, that's why we have water on the table. Bitter. Mm-hmm. I think this particular parsley that we were giving out at the temple, if you're having that, you might associate it with the bitter herbs. Let's uncover. I'm going to move your wine glass over here. Let's uncover our matzah. This is a plate with 3 matzahs on it. Passover did not begin as a celebration of freedom. It began, at least in part, as a harvest festival called the Feast of the Matzahs, the Chag HaMatzot, the unleavened breads. Over time, the holiday became associated with the saga of redemption from slavery. This uncomplicated bread of wheat and water took on fresh meaning as a worthwhile icon of the Israelites' emancipation from Egypt. A story circulated about how, in their haste to go forth from bondage, they had little time to spare. So they quickly prepared this plain bread to sustain them on their journey. The rabbis who created the Seder added yet another layer of meaning to the matzah. They recognized in its simplicity a bread of poverty. So we now raise our matzahs, and we will break one in half. We're actually going to break the middle one according to tradition. And as we do, we're going to recite this. Oh, they're almost even, but I think this one's slightly bigger. We're going to recite this remarkable text, originally composed in Aramaic, the language that everyone could understand. And there's a reason for that. Ha-lachma anya di'achalu Vahatana be'aradim Mitzrayim. Halachma anya di'achalu ahavtana be'aradim Mitzrayim. Kol dichvin yete ve'yechol. Kol ditzrik yete ve'yifsa. Kol dichvin yete ve'yechol. Kol ditzrik yete ve'yifsa. This is the bread of poverty, which our ancestors were said to have eaten in Egypt. Let all who are hungry come and eat. Let all who are in need come and celebrate the Passover with us. So the larger half now, I'm going to set it aside. We don't have any children here. We only have ourselves and our cat. So while this is the afikomen, and we will put it aside symbolically, no one's going to go look for it. So I'm not going to hide it in any special place. Just put it here where I don't see it so well. And I don't know, maybe the cats will search for it. All right, it's not obscuring the Seder plate, is it? All right. The Seder employs a dizzying array of rituals and symbolic foods. The rabbis who shaped its observance sought to prompt participants to ask questions about them. So they composed 4 questions in order to get the conversation started. Our questions need not be limited to these, but they are still a good place to start. Throughout the evening, we will address each one. Now, originally, these were actually at the end of the service, but the children couldn't stay up that late, so they were moved. And of course, traditionally, turn the page, yeah, reciting these 4 questions was the special job of the youngest person present. We don't have to go around the room like we do when we're in person at the temple, when I, by process of elimination, figure out who the youngest is, because it's just the 2 of us, and I am 2 or 3 weeks younger than Arthur. Asking questions, and lots of them, may be one of the most important things that we can teach our children, and that's why it's assigned to the youngest. And I haven't been the youngest of the Seder, well, I guess since last year, but I will get it going for us. Man nishtana halayla hazeh mikol haleilot, mikol haleilot, shebechol haleilot anu ochlin chametz umatzah, chametz umatzah, halayla hazeh, kulo matzah, halayla hazeh, kulo matzah, shebechol halelot anu ochlin she'ar yirakot, halayla hazeh, maror, halayla hazeh, maror, shebechol halelot ein anu matpilin, afilu pa'am echat, halayla hazeh, sheteife amim, halayla hazeh, sheteife amim, shebechol halelot anu ochlin ben yoshvin uvein mesubin, halayla hazeh, kulanu mesubin, halayla hazeh, kulanu mesubin. Why is this night different from all other nights? On all other nights, we eat either bread or matzah. Not so much matzah, but enough. Why on this night only matzah? On all other nights, we eat ordinary vegetables. Why on this night do we eat bitter herbs? On all other nights, we do not dip our food. Why on this night do we dip twice? On all other nights, we do not recline at a feast. Why on this night do we hold such a celebration? Now, you notice I didn't say in the traditional translation, why do we all recline? Because we're not. Although my grandfather used to grab a pillow and sort of lean against the arm of the chair a little bit. But really, the tradition of reclining is explained in this, the introduction to our story. Imagine yourselves living 2,000 years ago. The Jews occupy a world dominated by Greco-Roman culture. One of the most interesting customs of their time is called the symposium. Over wine and food, free people would gather to engage in storytelling, debates, or intellectual discourse in the context of a dinner party. For hours at a time, they would recline on couches, sometimes singing, sometimes engaging in games or other entertainment. Many people believe, or many scholars believe, I should say, that these symposia inspired our Seder. From the wine to the songs to the stories to the custom of reclining, sort of, we find parallels to these ancient Greco-Roman affairs. these extravagant Greco-Roman affairs. Like their symposia, ours features all kinds of stories and songs. One of the most famous of these is the story of the four children. The ancient rabbis loved to play word games with the text of the Torah. Through a careful examination of its phrasing, they uncovered four different instances where they imagined parents explaining the Exodus story to their children. The differences among these four verses seem to suggest four different types of children gathered for the Seder. One wise, one wicked, one simple, and one who is too young to even ask. Why don't you ask the question and then I'll read it.
What does the wise child ask? What are all of these rules and laws and customs that we follow tonight?
The tradition teaches us to answer in great detail, including all of the laws of the holiday. Modern people know that there must be more to our answers than that. When we encounter children who are hungry for knowledge, it's not sufficient to spoon feed them all that we know. We must also encourage them to think critically and independently. That is what places them on the path to real wisdom.
What does the wicked child ask? What does all of this mean to you?
The tradition denounced this question because its phrasing suggested that this child did not want to be part of the Seder. We need not see it that way. Children who challenge us are not wicked. Skepticism is healthy and should be encouraged. For that reason, we reject the traditional characterization of this child as wicked. This is definitely a humanistic Seder.
What does the simple child ask? What is this?
We all begin the process of learning as the simple child. We are open-minded and endlessly curious about the world. Everything is new, and we want to understand as much as we can. We embrace the yearning for knowledge in our children, explaining what we can and equipping them with the means to find answers for themselves.
And what shall we say to the child who is too young to even ask?
For these, our youngest and most dependent, the tradition suggests that we begin at the very beginning. In fact, that's a good suggestion for all of us, and it brings us to the heart of why we are gathered tonight, the legend of how the Israelites went free from bondage. The Magid, the narrative. The mythos of the Jewish people begins with a man and a woman named Abraham and Sarah. The Torah weaves an account of how they migrated from Mesopotamia to Israel and began a family that would become a nation. After 4 generations, a terrifying drought struck the land. Their great-grandchildren fled to Egypt in the hope of survival. At first, they were made to feel welcome. Over time, it is told, they blossomed into a multitude. The ruler Pharaoh enslaved them, forcing them to build his cities. Though they labored under the unyielding lashes of their taskmasters, they persevered, growing in number. Seeing how they flourished, Pharaoh feared that they would overtake him and his people. As a result, he became more vicious still, ordering the slaughter of their infant sons. The midwives, Shifra and Puah, refused to comply with this murderous command. Some have pointed to them as role models for civil disobedience in the face of great injustice. One woman concealed her infant son in a papyrus basket and floated him down the river. The baby's sister Miriam tracked him all the way to the palace where Pharaoh's daughter was bathing in the river. The princess drew the child from the water. She called him Moses and raised him as her own. The boy grew up with all of the advantages of a prince of Egypt, yet he could not bear the cruelty of his grandfather's rule. One day, while investigating the suffering of the Israelites, he witnessed the horror up close when he came upon a taskmaster abusing a slave. He intervened, killing the cruel overseer. Fearing that he would be found out, Moses fled. When he had put sufficient distance between himself and Egypt, Moses settled down. Soon he married into a kindly family. He became a shepherd and moved on with his life. One day, He came upon a fiery bush that burned but was not consumed. From this bush came a miraculous revelation from the God of the Israelites, instructing him to return to Egypt. There he was to approach the Pharaoh and demand that he set the Israelites free. One of the things that I love about the story is that though it is a legend, it tells the truth about enslaved people and their desire for freedom. And the folks who wrote this were themselves enslaved and took inspiration from that story, once again underlining the story's eternal truths. When Israel was in Egypt's land, let my people go. Oppressed so hard they could not stand, let my people go. Go down, Moses, way down in Egypt's land. Tell old Pharaoh to let my people go. You need not always weep and mourn. Let my people go. And wear these slavery chains forlorn. Let my people go. Go down, Moses, way down in Egypt's land. Tell old Pharaoh to let my people go. No more shall they in bondage toil. Let my people go. Let them thwart their evil foil. Let my people go. Go down, Moses, way down in Egypt's land. Tell old Pharaoh to let my people go. Pharaoh was indisposed to cooperate. So the God of the Israelites punished him and all of Egypt with 10 frightening plagues. And though Pharaoh seemed willing to acquiesce after each plague struck, he continually changed his mind until the last and most horrific plague, when the God of the Israelites took the lives of every firstborn Egyptian. After the terror of this final plague, Pharaoh finally came in. The Israelites were permitted to go free. Avadim hayinu hayinu, ata v'nechorin v'nechorin. Avadim hayinu, ata v'nechorin. Avadim hayinu, ata v'nechorin v'nechorin. We were slaves, now we are free. The story does not end there, however. For reasons unstated, Pharaoh again changed his mind. He ordered his military to pursue the Israelites, chasing them to the Sea of Reeds. With their backs to the sea and their destruction assured, the Israelites despaired. Yet their God had one more miracle in store for them. He divided the sea, and they passed through it on dry land. When the Egyptians attempted to do the same, the sea closed over them and they perished. We now know that the story we have just retold is the product of Israelite imagination. It does not describe actual events. There are aspects of the story that are somewhat disturbing. Some parts of the narrative even suggest that Pharaoh is not completely responsible for his own behavior. Just when it seems that he might relent, the Israelites' God actually hardens his heart. In any case, both Pharaoh and the God of the Israelites are responsible for much torment. To our modern sensibilities, neither of them comes out looking very good. Yet, if we strip away these and some other problematic elements, we are left with a theme that continues to inspire: the thirst for freedom. How many peoples of the earth have suffered under the taskmaster's lash? How many continue to live in misery? The slavery and redemption described in our legend may not depict actual events, but they do portray real human shortcomings. They remind us that at their worst, people exploit each other with little regard for their shared humanity. Our legend also portrays real human heroism. It reminds us that, like Moses or those midwives, Shiphrah and Puah, when people are at their best, they are capable of performing great deeds of valor, inspired by empathy and loving kindness. The history of the Jews has frequently revealed the worst in people. As a tiny nation, Jews were vulnerable to countless cruelties. When it was possible, they fled in search of safer homes, but it was not always possible. Their history of suffering came to an awful climax in the 20th century when they fell victim to a horrifying genocide. Yet today, for the first time in millennia, Jewish communities are flourishing throughout the world. Does this not call for special responsibility? Sadly, we do not find that adversity leads inevitably to an elevated ethic of compassion. Sometimes pain creates so much bitterness that those who were once oppressed now become the oppressors. We must make every effort to overcome this tendency. Perhaps our Seder can help us to do just that. Let us strive to translate its core idea into reality. Let our celebration of freedom encourage us to double and redouble our efforts to ease the lot of those who have yet to taste true freedom. Unfortunately, there is no difficulty finding such people. They may be found in every nation of the world, including our own. They are children who go hungry each day. They are women who are enslaved to human traffickers. They are men who labor ceaselessly for inhumane wages. They are countless. They are legion. Our path to Tikkun Olam, repair of the world, begins when we each recognize the power of our individual contributions. No one person can change the world. To do so, we must stand together. Once we begin to do our share, we will understand how what each of us does can ripple forward until it joins with the efforts of others to form great waves of change. It requires no supernatural miracles. It requires only that we respond to the best part of our humanity. This song has lyrics from two sources. One is the Haggadah, and the first part of it is from Rabbi Hillel, a rabbi who lived at the time that some elements of the Haggadah were coming together, but before it was in its final form. We don't have accompaniment tonight for a variety of technical reasons here at our dinner table. So if you're at home, I hope you'll join me in singing. Imenani li mili, וכשאני לעצמי מעני, ואם לא עכשיו, אימתי, אימתי. בכל דור ודור חייב אדם לראות את עצמו, כאילו הוא יצא ממצרים. אם אין אני לי מילי, וכשאני לעצמי מעני, ואם לא עכשיו, אימתי, אימתי. If I am not for myself, said Rabbi Hillel, who will be for me? And if I'm only for myself, what am I? And if not now, when? In every generation, the Haggadah teaches, Jewish people should imagine themselves having come out of Egypt to freedom. Our story recounted some dreadful plagues brought upon the Egyptians by the God of the Israelites. In responding to this, our tradition developed an important custom that was enshrined in the Haggadah. As each plague was recited, participants expressed their sadness for the Egyptians, yes, for their oppressors, by pouring out some wine and thereby decreasing the cup of joy. Our story depicts Pharaoh as the villainous persecutor of the Israelites. But it is not they alone whom he afflicts. The consequences of his deeds generated great hardships for his own people. They bore the burden of his decisions. How many times throughout history has a ruthless tyrant brought anguish upon the very people that he was charged to lead? In remembrance of the misery of all who have been inflicted in this way, we participate in the ritual of partially emptying our cups of wine as we recite the 10 plagues. So whether you do it with your finger, as we did in my family, or if you have a spoon, you can do that too. I'm going to chant in the traditional tune each of these, and then Arthur will repeat them in English. Dam,
Blood,
Tzifardea,
frogs,
Kinim,
lice,
Arov,
wild beasts,
Dever,
pestilence,
Shechin,
boils,
Barad,
hail,
Arbe,
locusts,
Choshech,
darkness,
Makat Bechorohot.
slaying of the firstborn.
Judaism is a rich culture. At celebrations like this, our ancestors felt enormous gratitude for the bounty of their heritage. I think when we were going through the traditional Haggadah with some folks, we counted that maybe 40-50% of it was blessings alone in thanks to God. One of the ways they did that was with the words of Dayenu. It would have been enough. One word says it all. It would have been enough for us. It recognized the wonders of this legacy. We too are appreciative of the opportunity to celebrate Jewish traditions. We too sing versions of this song. So we've got two here, but I think we're going to do the one at the top. If we only had our freedom Dayenu, if we only have our joy Dayenu, if we only have our hope Dayenu, and hope is something we've talked about quite a bit this year. Im yesh lanu chirutenu, im yesh lanu chirutenu, im yesh lanu chirutenu, dayenu, 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 dayenu. Im yesh lanu simchatenu, im yesh lanu simchatenu, im yesh lanu simchatenu, dayenu, 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 dayenu. Im yesh lanu tikvatenu, im yesh lanu tikvatenu, im yesh lanu tikvatenu, dayenu, 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 big finish, dayenu. Next page. There we are. Once again, in celebration of the right to freedom that we now pledge to spread throughout the world, yes, we raise our cups in joy. Brucha simcha ba'olam, misumenet b'fri agafen. Blessed is joy in the world, symbolized by this fruit of the vine. L'chaim. So now it's time to talk about the Seder plate. As we transition into our Passover feast, and one little program note for this Seder, we're going to skip over the meal and go to the last little parts of the Seder because, well, we know you don't want to sit there and watch us eat. And this is how we used to do it in my house growing up anyway, because otherwise everyone would have been out of it by the time we got to the end. In any case, let's take a look at what's on our plates. The Seder plate features a roasted meat bone. There it is. I also have a beet, which is the symbol for the vegan or vegetarian alternative. I meant to slice it open. I forgot because it's so red inside. I suppose it reminds you of the blood. It's a reminder that in ancient days, Passover was celebrated with animal sacrifice. This practice is long gone and we are well rid of it. But we retain this symbol as a vestige of times gone by and a reminder that customs evolve. Now to the egg. The traditional Haggadah text doesn't even mention or explain the roasted egg. Historians, however, know that the egg is a symbol of fertility. Consequently, many cultures employ eggs in springtime rituals. I can think of one where they like to paint them and go hunting for them. Now the orange. You will not find an orange included in any ancient Haggadah. Pardon me. This orange is a brand new tradition, and it demonstrates just how quickly new traditions can spread. I'll tell you, I've heard a million versions of this, but I am going to promise you this is the true story of how the Haggadah got on and how the orange got on our Seder plate. Its origins lie in a fable that some university students invented for a feminist Haggadah in the 1980s. Their Haggadah told the story of a girl who asks a rabbi about the place in Judaism for a lesbian. The angry rabbi retorts, "There's as much room for a lesbian in Judaism as there is for a crust of bread on the Seder plate." When a prominent professor of Jewish studies, Susanna Heschel is her name, came across the student's Haggadah, it gave her an idea for a new ritual. Placing bread on her Seder plate was out of the question. This, she believed, would suggest that people who were different violated Judaism. But maybe another symbol might do the trick. She selected the orange, noting that it suggests the fruitfulness for all Jews when lesbians and gay men are contributing and active members of Jewish life. Today, thousands of Jews around the world place an orange on their Seder plate. I bet it's in the millions now. Mm-hmm. It serves as a proud statement of inclusivity for everyone. And now let's talk about the two final symbols on our plate. Some of you may have 6 different pockets or places. Some of you may have 5. And after I read this, I'll explain that. But the two final ones we're going to talk about are the maror, and that is the horseradish. So we've got little sliced horseradish root. It's also symbolized by the chazeret, I guess I'm explaining it now, which was for some communities, was a piece of romaine lettuce, apparently bitter in those days, or some kind of dipping version, which we put some horseradish sauce there for chazeret, as well as maror, a bitter herb in that slot. We also, of course, the maror reminding us of the pain of slavery. We also have the charoset, it's right there. And that, of course, is a sweet combination of wine and fruits and nuts. Everybody does it differently. We had a dear friend used to make it with bananas, a Yemenite version, she told us. The charoset symbolizes the mortar used by the Israelite slaves to build Pharaoh's cities. Customarily, we dip the maror in charoset and eat them together. They are a small reminder that life can be bitter and sweet, and that sometimes we even experience both at once, as we are all once again discovering this year. So we earlier mentioned Rabbi Hillel. Rabbi Hillel lived over 2,000 years ago. He was a significant figure in Jewish history, and it was he who formulated the words we heard earlier, "If I'm not for myself," etc., but also the golden rule, the Jewish version, "Do not do unto others as you would not desire done unto you." Hillel lived before the destruction of the temple in Jerusalem. Quick quiz. Do you know when that was?
No.
70 CE. 70. The second temple, 70 CE.
On Tisha B'Av.
On Tisha B'Av, right. Well, that you got. Okay. Put you on the spot. He liked to combine a piece of the roasted Passover lamb sacrifice with some maror, the charoset, and matzah into one big symbolic sandwich. So let's see what we can do here. We do not have the actual sacrifice, so we're not going to use that. But if you are at home with a matzah and some charoset, and so forth in front of you, let me move our beet over here. You can go ahead. Let's take a little piece of matzah. We don't want to bore the people watching, but hopefully everybody's participating. And we'll get each of us one of those. All right. And here's some charoset, delicious charoset made by Sally at our temple. All right. Here, give me your matzah. I'll put it on top. Oh. And over dinner, we will have much more of this. And then
the white horseradish.
We can use either the white horseradish or we can use a piece of the.
Those pieces are very thick.
They are very thick. I don't think I'm going to chance it. Do you know what this is called in Yiddish?
Crane.
Crane. Exactly. Oh, your Yiddish is good. Okay.
That's what I still call it.
Okay. So, in his memory, this, which became known as the Hillel sandwich, but does not have a top piece because the lamb would have gone there, but you can certainly put a top piece of matzah on. We commemorate Hillel's importance to our history by combining these symbolic foods. L'chaim. B'tei avon, actually. Bon appetit. That's Hebrew for bon appetit. How sweet and bitter it is.
Oh, boy.
That's why we brought a pit. I told you we needed a pitcher of water.
Right.
Okay. Now, this would normally be, if you'll turn the page, good sir, this would normally be where we have dinner served, but we are going to not do that tonight. Instead, we're going to go ahead and reach for our afikomen and pretend we ate dinner so that you don't have to watch us eat our salmon and other tasty delights. Many of you also got from Sally at the temple. And the afikomen, which we'll explain in a moment, would normally either be hunted for by the children after being hidden or stolen by the children. That was another tradition. And the reason we give a prize to the one who finds it is because they're holding it ransom, because you have to have it at the end. You can't finish your Seder without it in the traditional, anyway, not the humanistic tradition, of course. The Greco-Roman symposia, which inspired our Seder, would often conclude with a custom called the epikomion, after-dinner revelry and entertainment. The word is related to the Greek epikomen, meaning dessert. So it was like the very last thing you'd eat. The Seder offers a version of this after-dinner treat called the afikomen. It is this half matzah that we set aside at the beginning of the Seder, which now provides a symbolic bookend to our meal. This was a very paltry meal for us, but, humanistic Jews, we can switch things up. We began by speaking about and tasting the bread of poverty that also serves as a reminder of freedom, and thus do we now conclude. So, since we have managed to locate it, let's have a little afikomen. There you go. Tasty treat. This is the point in the service where we normally have many, 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 many different kinds of praises, and we sing the Hallel section of Psalms. If you're very traditional, that's a lot of fun. We, however, take a different tack at the Birmingham Temple. We are going to engage in a little bit of an actual historical reconstruction or perspective. So when earlier we recalled the story of the Exodus, we acknowledged it as a work of fiction. Yet, only 100 years ago, most scholars still believed that the tale was true in many of its details. Then they started digging, literally, with shovels and pails. It eventually became clear that the story we had told ourselves for millennia did not take place. There had been no mass flight from Egypt, no conquest of the land of Israel, otherwise known as Canaan. The Israelites were natives of the land. They were Canaanites themselves. So how did the story come to be? In the late 2nd millennium BCE, Egypt dominated Canaan. The pharaohs demanded regular tribute from vassal kings who in turn exploited their own peasant populations. According to some scholars, in the 13th century BCE, the region experienced significant upheavals and power shifts. Taking advantage of these changes, many peasants rebelled, throwing off the yoke of their vassal kings. Archaeological remains reveal that some fled to and cleared Israel's central highlands, where tribes and towns began to form. In a long, complicated, and gradual process, they became known as the Israelites. Did this contribute to inspiring our story? If so, the Exodus tale may have served as an allegory about liberation from Egypt's ongoing domination and exploitation of Canaan's populace. The narrative may also reflect other ancient regional instabilities. Famines and droughts provoked repeated migrations. The Torah's stories about Abraham and Sarah's journey to Canaan and their grandchildren's descent to Egypt may disclose memories of these population shifts. Other historians suggest an alternative possibility, and by the way, both of these can sit side by side. They propose that the Exodus story was influenced by the experience of one tribe, the Levites, that may have come to Israel from Egypt. Many Levite names, including Moses and Aaron, are Egyptian in origin. You can put Miriam and Pinchas and some others in that group. The Levites were cultic experts and possessed no territory. Were they the outsiders who circulated the original Exodus tale? The details are buried in history, but history gives wing to legends, and legends yield heroes like Moses. Over hundreds of years, our story emerged with its account of one great man, dedicated to justice and to the liberation of his people. He challenged Pharaoh and led the Israelites to freedom. For millennia, he has inspired many others who have been downtrodden or enslaved to bring about their own deliverance, and that's why we told it tonight. Once again, in celebration of our freedom and with hope for the redemption of all who suffer, we lift up our cups of wine. Brucha simcha ba'olam, misumenet b'fri agafen. Blessed is joy in the world, symbolized by the fruit of the vine. L'chaim, once again, number 3 of 4. That actually is very, very tasty sweet wine. When they created the Haggadah, the rabbis argued about whether there should be 4 cups of wine or 5. The first 4 cups symbolize their interpretation of the 4 expressions of redemption in the Exodus story. I mentioned that earlier. The 5th cup was intended to represent the future redemption of the Jewish people. It was believed that a messianic figure would someday come to save the Jews. They imagined that the biblical prophet Elijah would herald his appearance, so they called it Elijah's cup. Today we understand that there will be no redemption and no Messiah. This doesn't mean that the world requires no transformation. It means that we must be our own saviors. It is we who must serve the cause of freedom. It is we who must bring social justice. It is we who must preserve our planet. In addition to Elijah's cup, a folk tradition arose whereby we open the door to invite Elijah to our Seder. This custom actually originated as a response to those who spread evil lies about Jewish customs. Opening the door revealed to the outside world that nothing nefarious was taking place at their Seder, except maybe requiring us to eat those bitter herbs and the charoset. We won't be opening our door tonight because to move this camera would be a 20-minute activity in and of itself. But we will imagine, and perhaps if you have a moment, you can open your door, the entrance of the spirit, at least, of Elijah, the spirit of freedom, the spirit of redemption that we all must work for. And in remembrance of times past and in honor of the hope for a brighter future, we open the doors of our heart to Elijah. Earlier, when we told the saga of Israelites' enslavement, you'll recall we met 2 heroes named Shiphrah and Puah. Though women were all too often ignored in our mythic literature, the Exodus tale brings us one more, Miriam, sister of Moses. Tradition regarded her as a prophet in her own right. When the Israelites were freed, it was she who led them in songs of gratitude. Jewish lore also attributed another miracle to Miriam, describing how a magical well followed her as the Israelites wandered in the wilderness. Water did not abandon them in all their 40 years of wandering, but accompanied them on all their marches. It came to be known as Miriam's well. Our Miriam's cup, and I really love it because it does look like a well, is filled with water. It's a reminder of the narrative of this wonderful biblical character. We've rewritten the traditional tune, Eliyahu HaNavi, Elijah the prophet, Elijah the Tishbite, Elijah the Gileadite. Those are places in Israel. We've rewritten them to take away the more supernatural elements, but more importantly, to add Miriam, the beloved sister who, with drums and tambourines sang about the wonders that they all experienced at the parting of the Red Sea. Eliyahu Hanavi, Eliyahu Hatishbi, Eliyahu, Eliyahu, Eliyahu Agiladi, Eliyahu Zachor Latov, Mevaser Tikvat Shalom. Eliyahu Zachor Latov, Mevaser Tikvat Shalom. Miriam HaNeviah, Ha'achot Ha'ahuva, Miriam HaNeviah, Ha'achot Ha'ahuva. Batupim uvim cholot, Tzahala latovot. Batupim uvim cholot, Tzahala latovot. Turn the page. The Nirtzah, the conclusion. Let's read together. Our Passover Seder has come to its end. With cymbals and songs we did blend new meanings with stories from ancient days, retaining their power to amaze. May we merit to gather again next year for this powerful tale we long to hear, and taste of its symbols and savor our wine, and like Roman nobles in freedom recline. And for the final time, we lift up our cups in joy, and we say, Brucha simcha ba'olam, misumenet b'fri agafen, l'chaim, to life, to health for everyone. What did our ancestors say when they conclude their seders? Well, they say what many traditional people say. L'shana haba'a birushalayim, l'shana haba'a birushalayim. Next year in Jerusalem. Why did they say this? Well, Jerusalem embodied their yearning to be free. We echo this desire when we say together, next year may all people know true freedom wherever they may be. Thank you for joining us in our home. I think we are going to do just one little song at the end, so if you can turn the page 2 times. And one more. And at the bottom there, you'll see Adirhu, again, rewritten. Now, at the end of a traditional Seder, people sing Chad Gadya. We have a wonderful version here. You can actually see on the screen. We got rid of the angel of death, and we replaced him with the health inspector who closed down the butcher, etc. And then the State Board of Health comes and gets him, because we wanted one the kids could sing along with. That's why we did that. But that's a long song, better sung when we have a nice large group of people. But this is a beautiful song, Adirhu, and it was rewritten with the help of my friend Natan Fuchs, and let's sing it together. Adirhu dror lanu, boyadav na bekarov, b'mehera b'yameinu bekarov, boyavo b'yameinu bekarov. One more time, because I got tongue-tied. Adirhu dror lanu, boyavo na bekarov, b'mehera b'yameinu bekarov, boyavo b'yameinu bekarov. Well, next year we sang it with a lot of uncertainty, and we said we hope we would be together in person. We know we're going to be together in person. In fact, many of us are already in person, and that's a great thing. The miracle not of magic deities splitting Red Seas, but of tenacious people looking for vaccines. Let's hope that in the spirit of freedom for everyone, this vaccine reaches all who need it in, as our rabbis once said, every corner of this globe. so that we can all be restored to our life and then continue the hard work of our tikkun olam, repairing the world, through the application of social justice and the humanistic teachings of dignity for every human being. Chag Sameach!
Chag Sameach.
Chag Sameach! And we will see you very soon on Zoom, on YouTube, and hopefully in person. Chag Sameach, everybody.
Chag Sameach.
Happy Passover.